India is on track to become the world's third largest economy by 2027, surpassing Japan and Germany. India's economy is already the fifth largest in the world by nominal GDP and the third largest by purchasing power parity. How did India become an economic powerhouse? Let's find out the answer in this video. As dawn broke over independent India in the 1950s, its freshly minted democratic leaders found themselves playing the leading roles in a thrilling saga. Their mission, should they choose to accept it, was to uplift a whopping 7% of the world's population. This segment's earnings were a mere 15% of the mighty US, a wallet disparity that could put any David and Goliath story to shame. The stage was set. 3/4 of the population were cast as humble agriculturalists, their tools as rudimentary as a 1990s dial-up modem. Their roles ranged from landless laborers to tenants on precarious contracts and small plot owners, all spinning the wheel of fortune to eke out a living. Life expectancy was a mere 32, and literacy, well, let's just say that only 14% of the population would be able to read this sardonic missive. Fast forward 60 years. The credits have yet to roll on India's unfolding drama, so let's bring out the World Bank stats like a box of old family photos. Since the 1980s, per capita income in India has been on the rise. Poverty rates and infant mortality rates have stumbled down the slopes, and these are no minor plot developments compared to the plot stasis under British rule. But if we were to line up India's progress report with that of the Asian classroom toppers, China and South Korea, it might seem like India's been doodling in the margins while the others were busy acing the test. Both of these countries were stuck on the same developmental page as India in the 1950s, but look at them now. One thing I would like to remind you: if you want to learn more about global economics, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'll be posting more videos about the global economy in the future. Let's get back into the story. India's tryst with industrialization in the 1950s was a bit like baking a cake for the first time. An interesting mix of small wins, burnt edges, and baffling results. It had its victories. The country finally made things like steel and chemicals, even if they came at great cost and had delays longer than a Bollywood movie. However, this grand economic narrative started to fray the edges in the late 1950s, revealing its share of unsightly plot holes. Many state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, handled more political agendas than economic ones, making losses faster than a love-struck protagonist losing his heart in a rom-com. And with their focus on capital and skills over labor, they couldn't really create the workforce that India urgently needed. The Halida fertilizer facility was an extreme example. It was a bustling, well-run unit that had everything except the fertilizer it was supposed to produce. It was like a party without the guest of honor, yet it went on for a staggering 21 years. Now, large investments in SOEs came with a price tag, and the government's solution was to run the printing presses overtime. The resultant inflation was like an unwelcome guest who overstays, and to tackle this, the government put a leash on the prices of essential commodities. This gave rise to black markets and even more regulations, turning the whole scene into a complex episode of Tom and Jerry, with the government and merchants chasing each other endlessly. On the agricultural front, the script didn't fare much better either. Land redistribution efforts faced more opposition than a villain in a thriller, with just 5% of the land getting redistributed. Efforts to form agricultural cooperatives fizzled out faster than a subpar fireworks display. The food crisis in the mid-1960s exposed the dire consequences of neglecting agriculture. The 1960s also saw severe inflation, making foreign exchange scarce and throwing the economy into a tizzy. A drought and conflict with Pakistan just added more fuel to the fire, pushing the government to resort to rationing. This had effects ranging from hoarding of foreign currency to industries sitting idle due to a lack of funds. It was like a chaotic potboiler with no end in sight. The industrial licensing system was plagued with inefficiencies and corruption, turning the process into a twisted lottery for political cronies and undermining faith in the government. However, the real heartbreak lay in the neglect of health and education. While India was busy bolstering its industrial muscles, it overlooked these vital areas. The result? Even 70 years after independence, half of the country's children were undernourished, half of the women were illiterate, and 2/3 of the population lacked basic sanitation. This made the average Indian feel like a bystander in the country's journey towards a market economy and globalization, a tragic, unnecessary irony in an otherwise inspiring story. In the aftermath of the 1960s food crisis, India went full throttle into agriculture modernization, creating a green revolution. Think high-tech farming with chemical fertilizers and modern grain varieties. It was a hit-or-miss venture. While we achieved food independence, the move deepened the wealth divide among farmers. Then, post-1965, the government decided to play helicopter parent with the industrial sector. Their idea of tough love favored small businesses and tied the big ones in a knot of red tape. This move spooked giants like IBM and Coca-Cola, which promptly packed up and left. This strategy also left consumers longing for products, with waiting lists for things like scooters running longer than a cricket test match. While small businesses had their moment under the sun, the country missed out on the benefits of economies of scale. The result was a market flooded with high-priced, low-quality goods that only the international markets found more unattractive than spinach to a toddler. Countries like South Korea and Taiwan soared ahead on the wings of exports, while India's economic growth inched forward like a snail on sedatives. The government's promise of better living standards? More of a distant dream, like finding the perfect selfie on the first click. Public unrest hit the roof, with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declaring a national emergency in 1975. Her drastic measures, such as rushed land redistribution and forced sterilization, created chaos and skepticism about the interventionist approach. By the 1980s, many concluded that the government's skills to manage a command economy were as effective as using a sieve to scoop water. Gandhi's son, Rajiv Gandhi, who succeeded her as prime minister, took a more liberal approach, relaxing some controls and sparking a period of industrial expansion in the late 1980s. So, the story did see some bright spots eventually. In 1991, when India's forex cupboard was as bare as Old Mother Hubbard's, the government decided that maybe this whole state-led development thing wasn't really working. The fall of the Soviet Union wasn't doing central planning any PR favors, and the East Asian tigers were looking pretty good with their export-led growth. Plus, as Indians, we were starting to embrace materialism. Let's face it, you can only lead a simple life for so long. So, under a little nudge from the IMF and a desperate need for their cash, we rolled out the red carpet for liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Goodbye socialism, hello capitalism. And boy, did the economy boom. GDP growth went up faster than the audience in a movie theater when the credits rolled, averaging 6.3% per year in the 1990s and 2000s. The telecom industry exploded from a mere 5 million landlines to millions of cell phones popping up like mushrooms. The poverty rate fell from 50% to 34%, and our forex reserves? They swelled to over $350 billion, leaving us wondering what to do with all this extra money. Our slice of the global trade pie also went up from a tiny 0.4% to a more respectable 1.5%. But let's not break out the champagne just yet. India's economic dance floor has some trip hazards. 90% of our workforce is stuck in low productivity sectors, while 10% get to party in high productivity global sectors. While IT and pharma are the life of the party, low-skilled manufacturing jobs, the kind that put food on the table for the poor in East Asia, are a no-show. Blame it on the strict labor laws and poor infrastructure. And don't get me started on our public services. They are as underwhelming as a soggy samosa. Schools and hospitals suffer from poor resources, low morale, and high absenteeism. The middle class has mostly checked out, opting for private healthcare, education, and transportation. Even electricity is a privilege, not a right. And the less said about our air pollution, the better. Unless being home to 13 of the world's 20 most polluted cities is a badge of honor. So, while they've come a long way from their socialist days, they still have mountains to climb. Technology and mechanization are changing the game, and the race to the middle class is no cakewalk. The challenge for India is to find a way to leapfrog these hurdles and improve the lives of its poorest citizens. No pressure, though. It's just the future of 1 billion people at stake. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video informative. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below.